The importance of winning 9 or 10 games and keeping momentum going.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, this show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime. Check it out. Download the Gametime app today. All right, we are going to talk all Arizona football on this show. Well, mostly Arizona football. Maybe we will talk about a little bit more, but this is a massive year for Arizona football. Now, I know that obviously last year Arizona was a great year for Arizona football. It was one of the 3 or 4 best in school history. And there haven't been a ton of banner years in school history, but this was certainly one of them. But the big problem that Arizona has had in the past is that they've been able to the exact opposite. They've been able to put together good football seasons, great football seasons. You know, I think back to 1994 with the Fiesta Bowl. Where Chuck Levy is still running down the middle of the field in Phoenix. But then you go into the next year, you are on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and listen, I mean, you didn't have a bad year, but it was an 8-4 season, and honestly, it was not what people were expecting. Now, so many of those games were super close. There were like 3 games that you lost in fluke situations, but at the end of the day, you were 8-4 and you finished 25th or unranked, depending on which poll you looked at. I think it's hard to look at that and say that Arizona was able to build off of any of that. And honestly, I think that was also, too, where Dick Tomey kind of lost his way to a certain degree because he started recruiting players like Amon Green, who were never going to come here to begin with. So there was certainly that. Then you had a bunch of 6-6, 7-5 type seasons, and then 1998-99 hits. And for my money, this is still the best team in school history. It was an absolutely loaded team. You had, I think, 17 or 18 NFL players on the team. The best player that I've seen at the U of A, Chris McAllister at one of the cornerbacks. You had Dennis Northcutt at wide receiver. Up until T-Mac, in my opinion, he was the best wide receiver in school history. Trung Candidate, who I think until Kadeem Carey was the best running back in school history. You had a loaded offensive line. You had 2 quarterbacks. Obviously, Keith Smith was better, but you had 2 quarterbacks that were more than capable. Jeremy McDaniel on the other end. You had 2 NFL tight ends, and on the defensive side, you had a lot as well. And that team went 12-1, beat Nebraska in the Holiday Bowl to finish, 4th in the nation, 4th or 5th in the nation, depending on where you look at it. So that was obviously a really, really good season for Arizona. And they went into next season with national title aspirations because they returned a ton of players. You returned 17 of 22 starters. Now, listen, some of those were massive losses, obviously. Chris McAllister was a huge loss. You lost also Edwin Mulatalo and Yusuf Scott on the offensive line, and you lost Kelvin Ifon, who was kind of the spiritual leader along with Jeremy McDaniel. But you still returned a lot of talent, and that team went into Happy Valley, and they looked like a middle school team playing a college team. That game was over before it started. It was, honestly, I think 41-7, and it didn't feel that close. It felt more like it was like 800-10. It was a mismatch. It was an embarrassment. And Arizona then was never really able to get that back under Dick Tomey. You had a couple more kind of fledgling years, and then obviously John Makovic came in and things really went down the toilet. Then you brought in Mike Stoops, and I'm going to quote Anthony Gimino on this a lot. Mike Stoops was really, really good at getting Arizona from point C to point B, in that he got Arizona competitive again, but he was never going to get Arizona over the hump. You were pretty much going to top out at about 8 wins with Mike Stoops. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but you were not going to get over the top. And I think after a while, you started to see too that you started seeing diminishing returns, and I think that was something obviously that if you're an Arizona fan, you certainly did not want to see. I do, but now going forward, you got Rich Rod who came in. Rich Rod did a lot of really, really good stuff here at the U of A. I think that you could make the case just from an X's and O's perspective that Rich Rod was about as good a coach as has ever come through here. And I think that he was kind of able to delude himself into scheming his way towards a lot of wins because he was, again, he did you put even talent on the field with Rich Rod, another coach, he's going to win. But a big part of it, though, is that Rich Rod always had his foot out the other door, and it was never able to sustain that success. And the big, I think a perfect example of that was the Fiesta Bowl year. Arizona had a year that I think, in hindsight, probably a little fluky. But either way, it was a good season. Arizona got to the Fiesta Bowl. They got to the Pac-12 championship game. They got absolutely boat raced by Oregon. But either way, they got to the Pac-12 championship game, which is obviously a big thing at the U of A. You won the South. Then you got into the Pac-12, then you kind of got away from that. In that the years of being able to rely on some of Mike Stoops' leftovers or players like that, that cabinet completely opened up, and it became a real problem, and you saw it. You ended up having, I think, a 3-7 year in there. Now, granted, you had a couple BJ Denker years where you were 8-5 as well, but overall just not good. And you could tell by the end that even though Khalil Tate had kind of reached the nation's consciousness, it didn't feel sustainable. You lost your last 4, I think. And granted, Rich Rod was a billion times better than Kevin Sumlin, obviously, but that one felt like it was kind of that one felt like it had kind of run its course. The big point, though, and then obviously Kevin Sumlin was an absolute disaster. The big point, though, was that Arizona was never able to really build on the momentum that it got from some fairly historic seasons by school standards. And that's how you get that stuff going with recruiting is that, listen, kids want to get paid now. I get all that. But you also want to be able to go to a place where you can win more, where you can be on national television, where you can look around and be like, all right, I'm on a top 15, top 20 team. Arizona has never been able to get to that point where that has been in the collective consciousness of recruits that this is a place where you can go and guess what? You're going to get paid here, but you're also going to be able to win football games. That has never really been the case at the University of Arizona because they just haven't been able to sustain it for a ton of different reasons, and that's kind of where we're going with this. So Jedd Fisch comes in, and listen, I don't like Jedd Fisch personally. I think Jedd Fisch is a stink. The way that he had, I don't care that he left Washington. Honestly, that's Washington's better job, obviously, but it's the way he left and the way that he tried to undermine Arizona at every single step on the way out that really I found quite unbecoming. Having his agent call media people and then try to give them a BS story about why Jedd left. Dude, get out of here with all of that. Shoo. But I will say that Jedd did a good job while he was here, obviously. Inherited a dumpster fire, and then by year 3, Arizona finished, 11th in the country? Something like that. And I think you can make the case that, he probably got a little bit lucky there because I think it's fairly easy to see that he did not want to play Noah Fifita. He wanted to play Jayden de Laura, and Jayden de Laura was terrible. If Jayden de Laura had played the entire season and not gotten hurt, Arizona's probably looking at a 5-win season, and Jedd Fisch is not hireable at all at Washington. But he did get hurt. Noah Fifita came in, and that's that. But that was an awesome year for Arizona, and they got a lot of notoriety in the process because you got the National Freshman of the Year, Noah Fifita. You've got arguably the best wide receiver in the country in T-Mac. You had a variety of other players, multiple guys that are going to show up on NFL draft choices or lists as well. But will Arizona be able to sustain that? That is going to be the huge key. And that's why there's going to be a lot of pressure on Brent Brennan in year one to be able to do exactly that. We're going to get into that in a second. But first, FanDuel. Check it out. All right, here's the deal with FanDuel. All kinds of good stuff going on at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/locked-on. Listen, basketball is winding down, but even if you're not an NBA fan, I know there's not a lot of NBA. There's some guys that are not NBA fans. Guess what? If you're betting on the game, it makes it more enjoyable. So again, check it out, FanDuel. Another one of these ones. I'm just trying to tell you, you all will thank me later on this one. FanDuel, FanDuel.com. This is where it is at. It's fun, it's enjoyable, and more so than anything, if you make some money, you know that you are going to be able to get that money back in a big way, and you're going to be able to get it back immediately. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Another one of these ones, again, where you will thank me later. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk a little bit about the where Arizona is in the grand scheme of things going forward. Brent Brennan comes in. Brent Brennan, I don't know that anybody was overly excited about Brent Brennan, but there's a couple things about Brent Brennan that I think that it's going to be very easy for Arizona fans to get behind. The first one is he's an awesome dude. He listen, however good Arizona can be, he's going to try to be that guy, I think, while he is here. He is, like I said, he's just a righteous dude, and more so than anything, I think he's also the guy who I think it's fair to say honestly is just the guy who, you know, is solid. I think it's very difficult to see him just falling on his face here at the U of A. I can certainly not see that. As a matter of fact, I would be stunned if that happened. But he's got a very, very unique opportunity here to be able to build off of this. And I don't know that when you look at Brent Brennan, I don't know that you're ever going to be amazed by what the recruiting is, but he's got very much of a Dick Tomey type feel to him. The one thing, though, that I will say is that he has got to be able to build on this. He has players at certain positions that he will probably never have again. And I don't mean that as a slight to him, but we're talking massive difference makers. We're talking guys who, you know, are going to be top 15 picks. We're talking Teteroa McMillans. We're talking Jonas Savaneas, Takario Davises, players like that. And he is, you know, he's the dude that he's got to be able to build on this. There's just no other way around it. And if you can string together a second top 10 season in a row, it's second top 15 season, all of a sudden, a lot of these kids coming up start to recognize Arizona is kind of being good. And you've got some marquee names you can build on, guys that have gone off to the NFL. Jordan Morgan was obviously a first-round pick this past year, and he, you know, and then so if you were able to get a first-round pick, and then Jacob Cowing, who was a fourth-round pick, Tanner McLaughlin, sixth-round pick, and then you can follow that up with a T-Mac being in the first round, a Jonas Savanea, Takario Davis being high picks as well, but more importantly, winning games and being in the national spotlight. Arizona to me should be a team that is going to be there at the end of things, where you know that all right, Arizona, they're going to be there the entire season. And you look around the conference at Kansas, or what else is out there? Kansas State obviously is going to be very good. You've also got Utah. A lot of people have Utah in the top 10. I don't necessarily see it. And a big reason why I don't see it is that I don't know what Cam Rising is going to be like, because Utah without Cam Rising, we saw last year, it can be limited. It can be kind of hairy. And so there's that. And then you've got Oklahoma State under Mike Gundy. They're obviously always going to be good. You got Kansas as well. You got 5 preseason top 25 teams. And Arizona is going to, I think, be squarely in the mix with those teams. I believe Arizona is going to be the best team in the conference, but you got to be able to put it out on the field. And the reason that I believe that Arizona is going to be able to be the best team in the conference is there's absolutely no excuse for them not to be amongst those. You have got to be in that 9 to 10 win realm. Look at Noah Fifita, for example. If the offense isn't absolutely fantastic, then that's going to be on this Arizona football staff. That's the best way that I can put it, because there are some questions, especially on the offensive line, about depth. But you got a great quarterback, you got great wide receivers. The running back room is going to fill up as well. You have got a lot of stuff to be able to deal with there, and I think that if you're Arizona, you got to be pretty excited about those possibilities. But you got to be able to win. Now, a big part of this is going to be able to continue to fill out the rosters. We've talked about there are some question marks still. You got to be able to get some more corners. You got to be able to probably get some more depth off the defensive line. You've also got to be able to get a couple dudes on the O-line, and I think the running back situation will square itself out. I do not worry about that. But I also, when I look at Brent Brennan, I do not, and the staff, I don't see a team of ace recruiters. I see a team of kind of a staff of lunch pail guys that are going to work hard, but you're going to probably there's not a ton of sex appeal to it, for lack of a better term. You're going to have to see these guys really be able to show this on the field. And honestly, that's the easiest thing, though, too. If you're a player and you're in this NIL age, you want to get paid, obviously, and you want to see a school that puts dudes into the NFL. And if Brent Brennan can do that, then I think it makes it a lot easier. Now, I don't want to totally besmirch Brent Brennan's recruiting, because a big part of what he did was he came in here and he had to be able to sell a lot of these kids on coming back to the U of A. A dude like Jed Fish was trying his hardest to get Tacario Davis to leave, to get Wendell Moy to leave, to get Jonas Savanea to leave. And that was part of his pitch to Washington, is that he was going to have a flood of players that were going to follow him. And they didn't, because they were smart, good people. But that also is still something, though, if you're Arizona, you got to give Brent Brennan a lot of credit for. But I'm going to go back to this point again, and I don't mean to say this in kind of a naysayer mentality, but it is kind of true. I don't know that you're going to get better players than you necessarily have right now at certain positions. Are you going to get a better quarterback than Noah Fifita? Probably not. Noah Fifita, in my opinion, and I've been saying this for a while, I believe he's going to leave here as one of maybe the most beloved football player in school history and the best quarterback. Probably not going to get somebody better than him. Are you going to get somebody better than T-Mac? No, probably not. Are you going to get people better than Jonas Savanea, Wendell Moy? Maybe you could, but those are some top-notch caliber players. What about Jacob Manu at linebacker? Are you going to be able to get guys like that? No. I mean, maybe, but we're talking All-American type. Tacario Davis, much the same way. Are you going to be able to get those type of players? And I don't know that that's the answer. I don't know that that's really the case. So we will find that out. But you got to build. If you get 9-10 wins and you're in there, all of a sudden a lot of things can happen. And I'll be honest with you, if Arizona can fill out the depth chart to a certain degree, I think you start looking at it and you're like, man, Arizona might be able to make a move or two in this Pac-12 tournament, this college football playoffs. If they get in there, maybe you win a game or two, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we are in a different realm than we thought we would be. So we will find that one out, obviously. But there's a lot of pressure on Brent Brennan. I also don't mind that pressure, though, putting him on him, because, again, he's getting paid millions and millions of dollars. So, again, I do not worry about that. That is part of the game. That is part of what you sign up for. But this isn't Jed Fish taking over for Kevin Sumlin. This isn't Mike Stoops taking over for John Malkovich. There are very clear expectations that are in place here. And I think that I think we laid down what really needs to happen. Now, you might say to yourself, Mike, where can I go watch some of these games? Well, I am going to tell you that a good place to start with is Gametime. Check it out, my friends, Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, Gametime is where it is at. From concerts to live games, you name it, Gametime generally has you covered. This is another one of these ones where you will thank me later for it. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Check it out, Gametime. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk a little bit then about what Brent Brennan needs to do. And that starts off with Kansas State. Listen, Arizona's got a couple gimmies to start the year. I get that. But then you're going to travel to Kansas State. I do not necessarily see the hype with Kansas State. Again, it's a very solid program. You got Avery Johnson in there, who obviously takes over for Will Howard, who left for Ohio State. But this is a team, though, that I think can be had. And I think that it not only can it be had, I know that it doesn't count as a conference game, but I believe that this 1,000% is a very winnable game for Arizona. And I think it's one that you kind of put people on notice that, hey, the A is here, the A is going nowhere. Because if Arizona was to beat Kansas State, I think you start looking at it, then you're like, all right, now, how many of these can we continue to run off in a row? Because, again, there's going to be some really tough games for Arizona. There's no doubt about it. And I don't expect Arizona to go through it. I don't expect Arizona to go through this gauntlet unfazed. But I do think that Arizona is probably at the place where they can. I think 10-2 is really, really reasonable. And I think that those are reasonable expectations for this coaching staff. So that's where we're putting it at. And honestly, this coaching staff knows what they've walked into. They know that this is a good roster. And I don't believe, and again, I know that you're coming in from San Jose State. I get all of that. But I don't believe that this should be a situation where you're really learning on the job. These guys have been coaches for a long time. And again, San Jose State, I get, is a drastically different level, but you have to be able to be resourceful at San Jose State. You have to be able to show a different level, I think, of, resourcefulness that you don't necessarily have to have here, but there's still some of that in place. I mean, in Arizona, you are not going to just walk into any kid's living room, like you would at Bama or USC and say, oh, hey, by the way, we're here. You're going to come play for us because guess what? We are Alabama or we are USC. That's obviously not the cachet that Arizona has. It's obviously a lot more than San Jose State. But again, you got to be resourceful when it comes to – you got to be resourceful when it does come to that. And I think that's where Brennan's going to come into this. All right, now – we're going to come back then. I would expect next show we are going to have some very good Caleb Love information, wink, wink. And I would assume we're going to break that down. That would obviously be a massive get for Arizona, and then we can kind of go from there and see where everything is. But Arizona football, Arizona basketball, both in really, really good situations, as is Arizona baseball. Arizona softball is showing it as well. So we will continue to put that out there. But as always, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Again, I would expect some very good news from Caleb Love coming out here soon. And again, Arizona, Kansas State, Friday, 5:30. That's going to be in Manhattan, Kansas. That is going to be a huge, huge game for Arizona and all of its fans. Try to make it out there if you can. But have a great rest of your day. And as always, thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. Bear down, back the A, and thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day.